Does he not look like the Grim Reaper right now?
Is it
Aditi,
ready?
please save us. Aditi, how are you today?
Why is Mikey awkwardly saying how you doing today?
Was that awkward?
Well, I think he was just trying to cut you all off.
Yeah, he was trying to transition.
Why?
Because we needed to be cut off.
I don't think
quite
so.
frankly.
Well, I mean, G is the one who just said this is terrible television, right? So,
That's all. He don't know what the hell he's talking about. Don't listen to him.
I told you. I said
And G speaks the truth. He doesn't sugarcoat
he's just trying to help him.
Aditi, on a much more serious note, we started
Jason
the show.
with his hood on his head.
Well, I just want to move the train down the tracks.
Move it.
On a much more serious note, we began the show obviously talking about the Damar Hamlin injury. We had Dr. Richard Figler on, who's the director of concussion, the Cleveland Clinic Concussion Center. What do you know? How do you know Damar? What can you tell us about the kind of person he is, and what you might be hearing from sources that we haven't heard anything about yet nationally?
Well, let's start with the second part of that. So
Sure.
I think it's very, very dangerous to speculate in any way at all. And I actually lived this myself a few years ago when I was in that same exact stadium in Cincinnati, and Ryan Shazier was hurt in the most frightening of manners. And I mean, last night, the first thing I went to was standing in the bowels of that stadium outside of that locker room as Kevin Colbert paced, just waiting for some sort of word. And Ryan had been taken away via ambulance. And, you know, Ryan and I, in fact, texted last night as we're both sort of jarred by this. So I think that the most important thing I remember from that time is that week as I was on air nonstop was don't speculate, don't guess, don't be an expert where you're not an expert, and as much as we can, let's humanize who this person is. Let's show a little window into the personality of who this young man is. He's not just somebody under a face mask, some dude in a uniform who fell on a football field. So if it's okay, I feel more comfortable going in that direction.
Absolutely.
Damar Hamlin is a Pittsburgh native, Jay, who, you know, in situations like this, we love to say, you know, this is a great young man who had everything in front of him. Guys, this really and truly is a great young man who has lived his life, who continues to live his life, who has been what any mother would want someone to be. He grew up in not the sweetest, ritziest parts of Pittsburgh, a suburb called McKees Rocks. He was very open in talking about how maybe half of his friends lost their lives before he was out of high school. His own father was in prison for 3.5 years when he was in high school, and his mother was desperate for him to go to private school. And so she ran a daycare center and she cleaned. And from the time that Damar was 12 years old, he was cleaning alongside his mom, helping her to earn money so that he could go to private school. He was the #1 defensive prospect in the entire state of Pennsylvania coming out of high school. He had almost 50 scholarship offers to every big name program that you could possibly think of. But his father had come home from prison, and he and his father and his mother had another son. And I think when Damar was going on his recruiting visits, his little brother was maybe 2 years old, a toddler. And so Ohio State, Clemson, all of these schools wanted Damar. And he chose Pitt football because he said it was that important that he be present for his little brother.
Wow.
And that his little brother see on a daily basis what his big brother is doing. And for Damar, he had talked about, even though while his father was in prison, he still had a relationship with him, it was different than his father actually being present. And so Damar wanted to be present for his little brother. So he goes to Pitt. He played 5 years at Pitt. He was a captain his final year at Pitt. I shared a story this morning that was written in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, one of the local papers here, that when the Pitt Panthers defensive coordinator had tonsil cancer, Damar was one of the players that he counted on to be his voice on the field. Damar and Miles Sanders and 2 other local Pittsburgh high schoolers who have gone on to play in the NFL for the last 2 years have run a football camp, a free football camp for 300 kids on the south side of Pittsburgh. No admission, no price. 300 kids go to this camp for free. I'm telling you all of this because Damar is not just a football player. He is not just a member of the Buffalo Bills who had something unbelievably frightening happen. This is a young man who you should be rooting for regardless. And I'm getting a little emotional, and I hate to be emotional, but I think you all know that my son is a massive Bills fan. And, you know, this is one of those players that he actively roots for because my son also loves the Pitt Panthers, and this guy's a Pitt Panther. Yeah. And so go away from me for a minute so I can just wipe underneath my eyes.
Here's an update. I know people have been following this. Hamlin was doing charity work, a toy drive.
Right.
And the goal was to raise $2,500. You see this? I actually saw another update just now. Apparently, Steve Becker says they've now raised almost $4 million for a toy drive where the goal was $2,500, and almost all of it has been done in the 15 hours or whatever it is.
I think it was around 100,000 before the game. Someone told me.
Guys, last night I'm not trying to take credit for this. I don't know who was first. It doesn't matter who was first. Yeah. But I know that last night I shared this. I hadn't seen it anywhere, so I shared it. And when I shared it, the total donations were not even $5,000.
Oh my
goodness. I can't remember when exactly I put it. I mean, I could find the exact time that I put it out. I think I was one of the first people that shared it. And when I did share it, it was less than $5,000. And within an hour, it was in six figures. And we just kept seeing those numbers go. And again, two parts to that story. One, the minute that he was allowed to do this, because remember, this is pre-NIL. He had to wait for his eligibility to end. The second that his eligibility at Pitt ended and he was legally allowed to create this GoFundMe, he did. He did do it 2 years ago. It was obviously like, okay, yay, I can raise money. And he's not looking to line his own pockets. He's looking to get toys for kids at this daycare center that his parents run. So it's that piece, that's who he is. And then it's the other piece that how great are people, right?
Yeah,
like as much as we sit here and we love to say, oh gosh, what is the world coming to? And can we be civil to each other and this, that, and the other, that people can unite in that way so quickly and in feeling helpless want to do something so much.
Didn't
and we see
happen with Josh Allen?
Result of that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Didn't something, Aditi, similar happen with Josh Allen and his mother? And the Bills fans were donating 17.
Well, Andy Dalton had
Andy Dalton
a few years ago, and Andy Dalton actually just donated $5,000 to the toy drive.
Over 151,000 different people have donated. Is now topped $4 million. Now gone over $4 million.
And I imagine that number will continue to climb. Aditi, you tweeted that out 45 minutes after he had fallen on the field. So in all likelihood, and I don't know who did it first, but obviously with your reach, your tweet, I'm sure has been retweeted thousands of times. And it's amazing how, we spent a lot of time, to your point, about social media can be such an ugly, toxic place.
Yeah.
But when you see something like what we witnessed in real time last night, first of all, the number of athletes, organizations, former players, teammates, people that didn't even know him that were tweeting prayers for Damar and his family. It was really moving. And then to see people reach for their wallets and their checkbooks as they did last night, it is really a testament to your point. People are great.
Because I think in this moment we all feel helpless, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what can we do? These men, these gladiators who go out there and entertain us every Sunday and Monday and Thursday and sometimes Saturday, who in the pursuit of doing a job in a profession also have all these ripples of dealing with are mocking the way that they play or extolling them or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And this boils it all down. These are all human beings. I mean, that ambulance didn't leave because they were waiting for Damar's mother to get in the ambulance. Yeah. They had to get Damar's mother down from the stadium into that ambulance. It's just, it makes me feel really good that in the absence of not being able to do something, so many people wanted to do something,
And
and
did.
we're seeing it in these donations.
Aditi, you obviously you said you spoke to Ryan Shazier. You speak to a lot of players. You know a lot of players. I wonder, eventually the players are going to get back on the field. I wonder for the players in this, for all players, it's going to be jarring, I think, the first time they go back on the field after this. But specifically to the players that played in this game, the Bills players who it's a teammate, T. Higgins who hit him, or had the collision with him that led to this. I just wonder from a mental standpoint and from you talking to guys, like, do you think it's going to be hard for all these guys to get back on the field? Because we see injuries and we see guys get knocked out, but they always give the thumbs up, right? But like to have him, as Jay said before, look lifeless apparently, and you don't even know, like this guy might die.
Adam, he needed CPR. He needed
right.
CPR.
This is unlike any other situation.
Right. CPR. I mean, yeah, no. Do I think it's hard? Yes. Nigh on impossible. I hope that every single team has adequate mental health professionals in their buildings today to talk to everybody.
Good point.
I mean,
Really
that's
good
it.
point.
Like, I don't know how else to address that.
Especially those that watched it.
Again, when I sit here, I'm not trying at all. Like I hate this idea of, oh gosh, okay, Aditi's texting this person and that person and talking to this coach and that. Like, I'm just saying, are you okay? Like it's all like, let's all check in with each other. Like, are you holding up okay? Hey, I'm thinking of you. I'm not trying to get one of Damar's former Pitt teammates who now plays with the Steelers to give me a quote to share on social media.
Sure.
I'm just thinking that you are personally affected by this, whether you were standing on that field or you were watching on TV or you know him or you don't, or you play this game or you have any interaction with this game or any of it. And yes, it is going to be impossibly hard. I think that the level of compartmentalization, all of those things, I can't speak to that because I'm not a mental health professional. So all I can speak to is, gosh, I hope there are mental health professionals in every single building and available to every person who needs to and wants to talk about this, whether you were a fan in the stands or you were on that field in a uniform.
Aditi, right along those lines, I'm concerned about T. Higgins, and we haven't really talked about that. But like, I covered Ohio State football when Jerry Westbrooks hit Adam Talafaro and paralyzed him, and the range of emotions that Jerry went through with that. I spent 45 minutes with him. Jerry was angry because Adam ducked his head and said, "You did that wrong. I can't believe you did that." And I'm not saying anyone did anything wrong last night. And obviously, this is even more tragic. Kurt Coleman paralyzed Tyson Gentry at Ohio State practice, and the weight that Kurt carried with that for years. Now T is in that situation. You know him. I don't know him at all. I just can't imagine what he's going through today. And you talk about mental health help. He's going to need it more than anyone, I think, is just you're going to feel responsible.
I mean,
regardless.
all I can, and T did not do anything wrong, and T is not culpable. And anybody who is saying his name he's another wonderful, wonderful, wonderful young man. All I can think about is that image. Someone posted a photo going back to the whole, social media, yes, can be bad, but yes, can also be great. Posted a photo of T walking out with his mother, and they had their arms around each other. And thank goodness there is that support there.
Yeah. Aditi, I know you know Ryan Clark from your days of covering the Steelers. He was really one of the main voices that we were getting our information from last night as he joined Scott Van Pelt after the broadcast had thrown it back to the studio. I thought Ryan did a marvelous job, but he said one thing that really moved me, and I reached out to Ryan and we had a brief conversation about his comment, and I want to get your reaction to it because you've covered these men, you know these people, in some cases almost boys, 24 years old. Well, I think back to when I was 24. Ryan Clark made a comment that said, and it was just one line, and it was so prophetic and moving to me. He said, at 24 years old, I didn't even know I could die. These guys, when they put on that uniform, they know there's inherent risk. But most of the risk that they think about is the risk of being paralyzed and changing their lives forever. I don't know that prior to what we saw last night, any of these guys, like race car drivers know when they strap in, this could be it. I may never touch the ground again, but that's never really been the feeling for football players because we had never seen it. Talk about the mentality, the almost gladiator mentality of these guys, and Ryan's situation of knowing that his sickle cell diagnosis and an earlier situation he had playing in Denver could cost him his life, yet he stood in Mike Tomlin's office and tried to tell Mike Tomlin through other doctors, I'm going to be okay, before Tomlin shut down the whole conversation. What are your memories of that and this mentality that I speak of?
Well, Jay, it's interesting you say that because I was getting ready to say I would urge everybody to go find the Pivot podcast, which Ryan does so tremendously. Awesome. I believe it was this past summer, had Mike Tomlin on. And they talked about that very episode where Ryan Clark had his family, had his doctors, had prepared a 30-minute conversation or persuasion to allow Mike Tomlin to let him play in Denver. And 5 minutes in, Mike Tomlin told him to stop talking and said, if you were my kid, there is no way I would let you play. And Mike Tomlin speaks very, very eloquently his responsibility to lead, to look out for these young men, to that, he had this line, I may butcher it, but it was something along the lines of, you cannot expect unique results without unique relationships. And so Ryan Clark, besides being one of my all-time favorites and tremendous at what he does, is uniquely positioned to speak about this very specifically. But it also, that conversation that he had with Mike Tomlin, I hope he gives you insight into where Zach Taylor and Sean McDermott were last night as well. Right. Because I will tell you this, they also, two coaches that I've spent a very good amount of time with, men first, coaches second, fathers first, coaches second, right. People who care about their players first, coaches second, all of those things. And the way that they together discussed this, and there was no conversation about we need this game for seeding but this is an important game or this is the biggest Monday Night Football matchup ever, that it was all about the men that they are charged with guiding and leading and protecting and looking out for. There's so much more to this than a game.
I think Troy Vincent
showed great leadership.
I think it was Troy Vincent that said this morning, what these two coaches did last night was lead. Mm-hmm. And Aditi, it's my hope that and there'll be plenty of time to dissect the minutia of the timeline of what was going on. We know about the Joe Buck comment that the players have been told, take 5 minutes and gather your thoughts, and then we're going to play football. And that just seems patently absurd. It seemed absurd at the time. To me, on the outside looking in, and there may be a lot of stuff that I'm sure there is a lot of stuff I don't know, but to me it felt like those that were leading last night were Taylor and McDermott, because I believe that they were I think Bull, you pointed out that Taylor came across the field, had a conversation with McDermott, and it looked like through the prism that we had that these were the two men saying, no, we're not going to do this.
Yeah.
We're not going to do this. And I hope we don't find out that the league was pushing the product, let's get this thing on the road, the show must go on, because this was unprecedented. This wasn't a player that was carted off with a thumbs up. This was a player laying motionless and lifeless without a heartbeat on the field. And when I saw the cutaway of Josh Allen, I immediately said, I think this young man's in a fight for his life, and there is no way you can ask these other 100 men to go back out there and play this game. And I think the right call eventually was made.
When Stephon Diggs started crying, they showed Stephon Diggs with tears in his eyes. And I lost it. I said, okay, this is not right. This is not what we have ever seen before. That alone. When have you, we've seen players kneel. We've seen players have nervous expressions on their faces, but like that, nothing like that. And
yeah, that image right there of Josh
this all
Allen.
says everything that you are saying about Zach Taylor speaks to who he is and who that Bengals organization is as well, and who largely the National Football League is. Let's be honest, okay? Like, there are a lot of really, really, really good people in the National Football League, and you know, if this is Steelers Ravens, I can see John Harbaugh doing the same thing. I can see
absolutely.
Mike Tomlin doing the same thing. If this is Browns Falcons, I can see, you know, so they did. Yes, they deserve kudos, but they also did what is expected in that they were humans, and we know that they are humans.
Aditi, apparently Mike Tomlin just spoke and would only answer 2 questions because he was starting to get emotional about it, because he was talking about how he knows this kid since he's 12 years old, and apparently his family put out a statement. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It just talks about how they are so thankful for all the medical people, for the Bills, for the Bengals, and how everybody treated it. They said there's apparently going to be a medical update at some point today. So,
this Jordan Rooney is the guy who tweeted out last night.
Yeah, he's his agent.
He is his marketing.
No, he's not his agent. He's not his agent.
No, he's not. I think he handles his marketing. And he put out a statement last night that said his vitals had returned to normal and that he was essentially had been intubated so that they could, control. He didn't really go into the detail, but did say that his vitals had come back to normal. And there was a lot, and I was, as I'm watching this in real time, and I know so many of the players at ESPN, and particularly some of the behind-the-scenes folks, I was really surprised that there wasn't an attempt to talk about Jordan's tweet or to get him on the air, because while Twitter and the Twitter sphere was trying to verify who this guy is, they were trying to parse whether or not this was reliable information. I thought this was the most important information in the moment last night, and ESPN never even made reference to it. I was really surprised by that.
But Jay, to be fair, we at CBS were told. Yeah,
no, I know you got to be careful. You've got to vet it. But what I was surprised at was, and this may have been going on behind the scenes, and maybe they couldn't get a hold of Jordan. But what, as a viewer, in real time, I wanted Jordan to be interviewed by Scott Van Pelt. Tell us what you apparently know, because it was so dire that Stefon Diggs reportedly took an Uber from the stadium to the hospital and essentially had to, I don't want to say muscle his way in, but he had to talk his way into the hospital.
Ben Baby had to vouch for him.
Yeah. Right, had to say, no, this is like one of the best receivers in the NFL, and it's his teammate. He needs to go inside. Everybody was dying for, wrong term, everybody was trying to get any information that they possibly could. And to me, I looked at this guy, I looked into his credentials, and I said, oh, this guy's legit. I mean, he's not some Yahoo who's tweeting out. Because he didn't have the blue check mark, people wanted to dismiss his information. I thought in the moment he had
but you know what, again, this is what I'll say again. I think that in a situation like this, you have to be very, very careful that there is not there's not undue speculation, that we're not playing like the, tabloid doctor. This person doesn't treat someone, but they're going to guess what 9 minutes of CPR means. So, let's not do that.
Right.
And I think it's also one of those things that you want to have respect for the family when it comes to the dissemination of any information.
Absolutely.
And Damar's agent yesterday eventually put out a statement that was different than what this young man, Jordan Rooney, shared. And I think that you have to be careful. It's not necessarily about the blue check mark, but is this person authorized to share this information about Damar's medical status? And being that it was someone that, did not necessarily have relationships that were in the media that were easily verifiable or substantiated, I think having a little caution is not a bad thing.
Yeah, I'd like to know
the Bills to release something.
What was going on behind the scenes? I would imagine that ESPN was trying to get a hold of Jordan to see if he would come on and share what he knew with them and their audience, where he got that information. It was really the only piece of medical information that we got from anyone last night. Nobody else had anything.
So I worked with medical and PHI for 8 years. So technically, even if they did have something,
Well, the HIPAA.
yeah, he can't. Even if it was, they would have to verify his wife, and even if so, you would have to have a power attorney as the only person that could really speak on your behalf, unless he gives you permission to do so. But obviously, he's not conscious enough to do it. So I can see why they kind of said, "No, I don't know who you are. We can't let you in."
Aditi, I know this is a terribly speculative question. We chewed on this a little while earlier. At the last thing anybody was thinking about last night, and really even today, is playing a football game. But ultimately, the NFL has on its plate right now a very weighty decision that is going to have implications, really perhaps going all the way to the Super Bowl, as home field advantage is at stake. It's impossible to guess what the NFL is going to do here, but what do you see happening and how this decision is made, what the timeline has to be? It's incredibly time sensitive going into the final week of the season. How do they navigate this really uncharted territory?
I don't work for them anymore. So
You know how they operate, though.
Yes, you know what, I think that these are all conversations that are being had. I hope that part of how, whether it was true or false, this 5-minute thing, which we heard Troy Vincent say that it was false and wasn't actually anything that the league had suggested, that there would be a 5-minute break and then, a 5-minute warm up and a return to the field, whatever. But sometimes the outcry in response to that, even if it was false, was such that I think there's a strong awareness that you need to do the right thing. And we may not know what that right thing is right now, but this isn't just about optics. This isn't just about money and TV contracts and orderly scheduling. You need to, as you talked about earlier, all of these ripple effects, you need to consider every single one of them. I don't know. I can't speculate. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if you just,
it's hard. There's
these
no
two
easy
teams
answer.
play 16 games and that's it. And you just cancel that game and you move forward and the standings are what the standards are, where they are today, and they play a week 18 next week. I don't know that you can, at this point, play that game, repeat that game. The Bills got on their plane and they went home because they were in no position to stay in Cincinnati and potentially lace up and play today. So you just cancel the game, and there's no forfeit. There's nothing. It's just two teams play.
And you go
one
off
less
winning
game.
percentage.
Yeah.
You
I
could
think-
do it that way.
Aditi, I think I said before that if they're gonna replay it, they move the whole season back a week. Next weekend they just play Bills Bengals, assuming he's okay by then. I think if he's not, then I don't know. But if he's recovering, I think you push the whole season back a week, except for the Super Bowl, because you have 1 week instead of 2, and you play just Bengals Bills next weekend, and then play the final week the week after and push everything back. You think there's any chance they would do that? I think that's the only thing that makes sense if you're going to play the game.
I don't, Adam, I don't know. I will say this, after covering this league for 15 years and not having ever witnessed anything even remotely close to this, Yeah,
it's impossible.
Is it smart to put these young men back on a football field in 4 days, in 5 days? I just don't, I don't think it's like the University of Virginia. I don't think they just end the season, or don't play. But I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. I have no idea.
It's a tough one. And I don't envy them because it's
going back there, and again, I'll use this again, and only because it's a personal experience. I remember when Ryan Shazier went back to Cincinnati for the first time after he was hurt and walked on that field. I just, I don't know if the Bills can be psychologically ready to go back to Cincinnati right now in, again, 4 days. I don't want to speculate. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I wish that I had some good answers for you. I wish I had something concrete. Yes. But again, this is why they make those decisions. And you know what? There are a lot of smart people there at the National Football League, smart people within these organizations. And I am having faith that they are considering any and all angles, that this is not just about money and cleanliness and a schedule and fairness. And I'll tell you this, I'll give you one piece of speculation. If they don't play, And if there are two teams that play one fewer game, there's not going to be one coach out there that complains that that's a competitive disadvantage or advantage or unfair ground.
Right.
No,
I mean, not even the Chiefs, who are in a situation, obviously, where it could cost them home field advantage. We don't know Cincinnati, Buffalo. All these teams are in the mix. Yeah. I think no matter what the league does, there's going to be criticism because that's just the way it is. It's almost like, you know, not in scope, but when they were making the Deshaun Watson decision and all of that was going on, everybody knew that it doesn't matter. You're not going to win. That you can't win this PR battle.
Right.
Yeah. I know the league, and you know this, Aditi, oftentimes they put their finger in the air and they sort of test which way the wind is blowing.
Which way is the wind blowing?
Before they make these decisions, and that's always been one of my criticism of the league. I hate the notion that you make decisions based off polls, based off public opinion. Do the right thing, and you know what that is.
Jay, that's what I was saying to you earlier, that if we are thinking about the way the wind was blowing, it's pretty darn uniform.
Yeah, they can't miss this one.
I mean, what happened to, who was it? It was Skip Bayless, right?
Yeah.
Right yesterday? Skip Bayless, who got completely, not that I want to give any extra attention to any of this, but ripped in every which way for his take on continuing to play the game. So, you know, if it is something where it's where is public opinion right now, public opinion is that the single most important thing right now is the mental health of these men.
Well said.
Thanks, Aditi.
Aditi, I know this was tough for you. We adore you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts on what I know is a very, very difficult afternoon for you. Thank you, Aditi.